Her body's thoughts climbed from her conscious limbs and carried their yearnings to its mystic ground, where nature's murmurs meet the ineffable.
Good morning. We're reading in Book 7, the Book of Yoga, Canto 6, Nirvana and the All-Negating Absolute. And we've come to page 541, line 332. So in the last canto, Savitri had found her soul, and all her chakras opened, and the divine self, her individual higher self, could express itself through all her being, through all the aspects of her being. And she was happy and fulfilled, and her life continued with Satyavan in the forest, and she was happy. And then again, she was with him one night. He was sleeping, and suddenly this kind of abyss opened up below her, and she just felt his upcoming death and its finality. And she felt very strongly, vividly, this emptiness, this void which underlies things. And it was kind of a very terrible experience for her. I'll read a little of what she was experiencing at first. So this is on page 534, about 2/3 of the way down. It seemed to cry to her without thought or word the message of its dark eternity and the awful meaning of its silences. Out of some sullen, monstrous vast arisen, out of an abysmal deep of grief and fear, imagined by some blind, regardless self, a consciousness of being without its joy, empty of thought, incapable of bliss, that felt life blank and nowhere found a soul. A voice to the dumb anguish of the heart conveyed a stark sense of unspoken words. In her own depths, she heard the unuttered thought that made unreal the world and all life meant. And then it kind of speaks to her and tells her, hope not to be happy in this world, which is all just an illusion and will dissolve into nothingness. And then a different voice came. The cry of the abyss drew heaven's reply, a might of storm chased by the might of the sun. This is towards the top of 536. It says, O soul, bear not the kingdom to the foe. Consent to hide thy royalty of bliss, lest time and fate find out its avenues and beat with thunderous knock upon thy gates. Hide whilst thou canst thy treasure of separate self behind the luminous rampart of thy depths, till of a vaster empire it grows part. And then it tells her, But not for self alone, the self is one. Content abide not with one conquered realm. Adventure all, to make the whole world thine. To break into greater kingdoms, turn thy force. Fear to be nothing, that thou mayest be all. Assent to the emptiness of the supreme, that all in thee may reach its absolute. So it goes on and tells her that she's here not for herself, but to bring light to the entire world, and that she must unite herself with all that is, with all beings. But in order to do that, she has to enter into this emptiness of the Supreme. And so then she turns again, plunging her deep regard into herself, in her soul's privacy, in the silent night. So she goes within and stands back from all the movement of her nature, aloof and standing back, detached and calm, a witness of the drama of herself, a student of her own interior scene. She's entering into this witness, Purusha consciousness, looking out on the outer layers of her being and its movements of thought and mind. She watched the passion and the toil of life and heard in the crowded thoroughfares of mind the unceasing tread and passage of her thoughts. All she allowed to rise that chose to stir, calling, compelling not, forbidding not. She left all to the process formed in time and the free initiative of nature's will. So she just allows this play of nature, of thought and emotion, passion, impulse, standing back from it detached, as if watching it on a screen. And she also experiences the inner realms of consciousness, the subtle planes of consciousness, and the movements of nature there, and witnesses those as well. A sight opened upon the invisible, and sense the shapes that mortal eyes see not, the sounds that mortal listening cannot hear, the blissful sweetness of the intangibles touch, the objects that to us are empty air. Are there the stuff of daily experience and the common pabulum of sense and thought? The beings of the subtle realms appeared, and scenes concealed behind our earthly scene. She saw the life of remote continents and distance, deafened not to voices far, She felt the movements crossing unknown minds. The past events occurred before her eyes. The great world's thoughts were part of her own thought, the feelings dumb forever and unshared, the ideas that never found an utterance. The dim, subconscious, incoherent hints laid bare a meaning twisted, deep, and strange. The bizarre secret of their fumbling speech, their links with underlying reality. So we see as she enters into this greater depth of silence of her being, she's able to see all these different planes of existence as movements, but detached from them, observing them, but uninvolved, but seeing it all as one grand totality. So that's where we left off. And she's going to continue to observe this movement of nature in her and around. And then in particular, she's going to examine the birth of thought and where it comes from. So we're at line 332, I believe. And Paula?
The unseen grew visible and audible. Thoughts leaped down from a superconscient field like eagles swooping from a viewless peak. Thoughts gleamed up from the screened subliminal depths like golden fishes from a hidden sea. This world is a vast, unbroken totality. A deep solidarity joins its contrary powers. God's summits look back on the mute abyss. So man evolving to divinest heights, colloquies still with the animal and the jinn. The human Godhead with stargazer eyes lives still in one house with the primal beast. The high meets the low. All is a single plan. So she beheld the many births of thought, if births can be of what eternal is. For the eternal's powers are like himself, timeless in the timeless, in time ever born. This too she saw, that all in her outer mind is made, not born, a product perishable, forged in the body's factory by earth force. This mind is a dynamic, small machine producing ceaselessly till it wears out, with raw material drawn from the outside world, the patterns sketched out by an artist god. Often our thoughts are finished cosmic wares, admitted by a silent office gate and passed through the subconscious galleries, then issued in time's mart as private make. For now, they bear the living person's stamp, a trick. A special hue claims them his own. All else is nature's craft, and this too hers. Our tasks are given. We are but instruments. Nothing is all our own that we create. The power that acts in us is not our force.
Thank you. Let's pause there. I'll read some of Shraddhavan's commentary on this. She says, "This world that we live in is a vast, unbroken totality, an undivided whole. Everything is connected, so that even things that seem to us contrary, opposite, and contradictory are in fact joined in a deep solidarity, a profound oneness. The higher levels of existence, God's summits, are still connected with and can look back to the mute abyss, the darkness and silence of the deepest levels of the inconscience. Because of that unbroken totality and deep solidarity, we human beings who are evolving upwards towards the highest heights of divine consciousness are still in communication with the lower levels from which we have come, the level of the animal consciousness and the level of the jinn. Not sure how that's pronounced. To colloquy means to speak with. Jinn is an Arabic word referring to a race of subtle beings in Islamic mythology. In the Arabian Nights stories, we read about them as spirits who have been imprisoned in a bottle or a lamp, who have to obey the person who frees them and fulfill all their wishes. It is said that the jinn are the first children of our father Adam, born to his spirit wife Lilith, before God created a human mate for him. So we human beings are related to those pre-human subtle beings and may be unconsciously in communication with them. The human Godhead, our divine soul, which looks up to the many higher truths above us, lives still in one house with the primal beast. Our human body is the house where all our different parts live. Our divine soul, the human Godhead with stargazer eyes, is sharing the house with the primal beast, our most primitive animal part. In us human beings, the highest levels of existence meet the lowest levels. The high meets the low. All is a single plan. And then looking into herself and observing where all the different kinds of thoughts come from, Savitri sees that there are many births of thought. Then Sri Aurobindo says, if births can be of what eternal is. It is a mystery that what is eternal can be born. But he explains this mystery in the very next line by saying that the powers of the eternal, such as thought or life or ourselves, are like the eternal himself. He is timeless in the timeless, in the transcendent state beyond time, in space, in manifestation. Our eternal being is perpetually reborn. In this way, our eternal, timeless being expresses itself through time in the process of evolution. At the same time, Savitri sees that the thoughts that cross our outer surface mind are not born. They are not powers of the eternal. They are manufactured and perishable products which cannot last long. They are forged. This is a word which has two meanings. One meaning refers to things that have been made by a smith in his forge, made from metal with a lot of labor. The other meaning refers to things that are not genuine but fakes, imitations, forgeries. Both these meanings can be applied to the products of outer mind which are manufactured in the physical brain. The body's factory by earth force, the material energies of nature. This mind, our surface mind, is a small machine that is full of energy, always running, dynamic. It goes on ceaselessly producing thoughts till it wears out. Machines wear out eventually, and so do our minds. In order to make its products, the mind uses raw material drawn from the outside world. A manufacturer needs a constant supply of raw materials to keep his factory running. The supply of raw material fails, the factory will have to shut down. The raw materials that the mind machine uses are drawn from the outside world, the world outside the body. A machine does not make decisions about what to produce. It is given a pattern or a series of patterns to follow to produce a certain product. The mind machine is following patterns that have been sketched out by an artist god, perhaps by a higher level of mind. And then, when Sri Aurobindo says often our thoughts are finished cosmic wares, admitted by a silent office gate and passed through the subconscious galleries, then issued in times marked as private make. And here the poet is following out the image of a factory, saying that our thoughts often come to us ready-made. They are finished cosmic wares, produced or created in the universal consciousness. They are not produced in the brain factory itself, but only smuggled in through a silent office gate. Then they are passed through the passages and galleries of the subconscious without our conscious awareness. And if you are a merchant collecting products from many different people, you will have an office where the various things will be received and then they will be passed on. Perhaps they'll be modified before they are sold under your label, as if you had made them yourself. Here it is something like that. These thoughts come to us out of the universal field, all ready-made. There is a secret office gate that allows them to enter our individual consciousness, where they get passed through the subconscious galleries into our surface mind, and from there we express them, issuing them out of our mind factory to be exchanged in time's mart, the bazaar of time, as if we had produced them ourselves. If you observe yourself carefully, you may begin to become aware of this process happening. When we issue or express these thoughts as they pass through our brain, our consciousness, our mouth, clothed in words which we have given to them, they bear a distinctive mark that says, "Made by me." They bear the living person's stamp. Some distinctive trick or way of expression, or some special hue or color identifies them as having come from that particular living person. They have been modified in some small way. A trick or special color shows that they have passed through our particular warehouse. Everything else about them has been done by nature, by her craft, her skill. And even this distinctive personal mark comes from her as well.
He is using the pun of forge, so they're fake, but they're also manufactured, and they come from outside, that's through the senses, but they also come from outside in the etheric planes. They go through the subconscious, so we're drawing on all these sources for thoughts, but the thoughts themselves, what we experience, are made up by ourselves. So actually our experience is a manufactured thing that's happening in our head and does not correspond to what's in front of us. So the senses are also delivering fake data, let's say, and they're forging things in us. Then we have the animal body, which is influencing all of these things. So with all of this, it seems to correspond to quantum theory, where you have a unified energy field of which, according to our perception, we are determining our experience as a particle, as a wave, if you want to use those metaphors. So it's completely different from the conventional patterns that we have learned in school or regular physics or psychology. So this basically really, without an integral psychology, we cannot exist in this world in any authentic way. Well, what would you say about all that?
Yeah, I would say that he seems to be telling that all of this is done by nature, by a kind of this universal energy, this universal, you can say, consciousness or even universal being. And it's kind of channeled through each individual and takes on that particular, color of that particular person expressed in a particular way. But it's all coming from this universal energy. And so you may express these thoughts in one way and I may express it slightly differently, but it's all coming from this greater, wider, universal force. At the same time, this universal force has many different levels to it. So things may come from higher levels of the mind, or they may come from the vital or from the lower levels of mind. So some of this he talks about as if coming kind of as raw material from the universal energy, and then our brains, physical brains, kind of create something from it. But then he also speaks of things that come ready-made. So to some extent we may use kind of the materials from the outer world, put them together, manufacture them in a particular way and come out with some model, let's say, of the outer world from these raw materials that we take in. Yeah.
Because I think he's trying to explain these things in terms that we can understand. Because everybody knows about commerce,
Right.
and the merchant leaning over his wares and all that stuff. So all those metaphors are used to try and get us, I think, to go beyond the idea
Right.
that these things are not material, actually. These are levels of consciousness, I think.
Yeah, he's applying the metaphor of physical things to the birth of thought, right? But at the same time, I mean, the metaphor is particularly apt because we, actually do put patents on ideas, right, that are coming from this universal store of universal mind, and then we give it a particular little twist or form, and then we claim that as mine, and then we sell it, and then we can market it on YouTube or wherever, and or on our podcast, and sell it to the advertisers maybe. Or so we actually kind of do bring it down to kind of that level. But there's also then this exchange that is going on of ideas between all the different gurus and different people with their particular ideas, which are all giving a particular twist and form to something that's universal.
I have a question for you, Pete. You used.
Just wait a second, let's
I'm
try
sorry.
to capture on this.
I was attracted by your phrase, the authentic self. You use that in your first little, spin around this topic. What exactly are you thinking about? Because as you're describing, the things that we do can be very much just a derivative of really vast nature, and they're not emerging from the authentic self. So I'm curious about what you were thinking when you brought that term into the conversation.
That term is the realization that each of us has to come to, which is what he is, for me, giving in Savitri. That's the coming to the connection with the soul. So what we're trying to do is what Savitri has done, what first her father did, and then she did, and then it has to be applied to the world. But what happens in Savitri is that she does it all, conquers the death and figures out everything, but then the greater dawn has to come, and that's us. So how do we get the authenticity of assimilating this, and the evolution moves forward, because this is supposed to be a dynamic thing. This is not a historic occurrence in time, it is eternal. And that was so good, that part where he has notes in time, so that we have that the eternal can be in time, but it also has to continue into the now, because the most wonderful moment we have is only now.
So I'll maybe say something too about that. So there is this individual divine self, right? This Jivatman, which expresses itself through our evolving soul, right? And so that could be something of our authentic self. Again, I mean that Jivatman is individual, so it is a particular expression of the divine, but at the same time it holds within it or behind it that transcendent or universal aspect of the divine as well. So it sees itself as one particular expression of a divine whole. It doesn't lose that consciousness of that it's a part of the whole and one particular expression of it.
Isn't that why we need all different terms? Because if you speak of the Jivatman, what about the psychic being?
Right.
See, in Sri Aurobindo's terminologies, we're using that. That seems to be the place where we can communicate.
Yeah. So that is kind of that greater self descending into the world evolution with into physical matter, into this particular physical world, and gradually developing towards a divine expression, towards a kind of a manifested expression of that greater timeless being, let's say, here in time.
Toward the supramental being, the truth consciousness, all these words, not to get lost in the terms.
Right.
And be able to somehow stimulate the experience.
But what he's emphasizing here then in this canto is this need to go back into that timeless self in order to recover that authentic self, right? So consent to be nothing so that thou, may be all, right? And in the next canto, she's going to realize this cosmic consciousness, for that also is a necessary component of it. So it's not only to have behind one's experience this timeless or transcendent self, but also the universal being, and be part of that, unified with that. And not losing still that individual expression. But I think we should...
Yeah, that's the contradiction, that where you have to have the individual and the collective.
Yeah.
We have to have the so-called authentic self, but we also have to have the universal self, and the mind cannot grasp that. See, so that's why we are talking about the psychic.
Okay, let's continue. You see.
High she attained and stood from nature free, and saw creation's life from far above. Thence upon all she laid her sovereign will, to dedicate it to God's timeless calm. Then all grew tranquil in her being's space. Only sometimes small thoughts arose and fell, like quiet waves upon a silent sea, or ripples passing over a lonely pool, when a stray stone disturbs its dreamy rest. Yet the mind's factory had ceased to work. There was no sound of the dynamo's throb. There came no call from the still fields of life. Then even those stirrings arose in her no more. Her mind now seemed like a vast empty room, or like a peaceful landscape without sound.
Let's pause a second. I think we skipped over a part. So let's go back to the genius too receives.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
The genius too receives from some high fount, concealed in a supernal secrecy, the work that gives him an immortal name. The word, the form, the charm, the glory and grace are missioned sparks from a stupendous fire, a symbol from the laboratory of God, of which he holds the patent upon earth, comes to him wrapped in golden coverings. He listens for inspiration's postman knock, and takes delivery of the priceless gift, a little spoiled by the receiver's mind, or mixed with the manufacture of his brain. When least defaced, then it is most divine. Although his ego claims the world for its use, man is a dynamo for the cosmic work. Nature does most in him, God the high rest. Only his sole acceptance is his own. This independent, once a power supreme, self-born before the nature was made, accepting cosmic, binds himself to nature's serf, till he becomes her freedman or God's slave. This is the appearance in our mortal front. Our greater truth of being lies behind. Our consciousness is cosmic and immense, but only when we break through matter's wall. In that spiritual vastness can we stand, where we can live the masters of our world, and mind is only a means and body a tool. For above the birth of body and of thought, our spiritual truth lives in the naked self, and from that height, unbound, surveys the world.
Thank you. Let's pause there.
Yeah.
So this part kind of reiterates some of the same issues. Here he speaks of the genius too is also receiving from this universal mind, but from maybe higher levels of it, from some high fount concealed in a supernal secrecy. But in the sense it's the same, and it might even then be a little spoiled by the receiver mind or mixed with the manufacture of his brain. When least defaced, then is it most divine. And then we can even think of the poet and the poetry that comes from the higher levels of consciousness coming through can also get mixed with the manufacturers of the mind, but if it can be kept pure and undefaced, then it becomes most profound, most like the true mantra poetry. And then these few lines here kind of explain succinctly this process. Although his ego claims the world for its use, man is a dynamo for the cosmic work. Nature does most in him, God the high rest. Only his soul's acceptance is his own. Yeah. But, yeah, it's, although very deep in its significance, but our souls have accepted our nature, to live in this nature, to live in this, and express this particular personality. The soul has accepted to do that, but all of it is actually nature's operation. Our body, our life energies, our mental energies, it's all nature, but our soul has accepted to express itself through these.
The trick is to break matter's wall.
Yeah.
See, that's what I can't do because it's all matter.
Yeah.
And people normally cannot get out of the materialism. It's too strong.
Or it's like the physical consciousness, right? So we can get out of it, but it's not easy to do. And normally it would be done in some kind of deep meditation or trance. We can kind of shoot out of it and escape into some vast consciousness. But inevitably we come back into that limited, small personality, ego. But he says that our spirit stands above this. Our true self is standing high above this outer mind and outer nature that we normally live in, watching it from on high. Our spirit's truth lives in the naked self, and from that height, unbound, surveys the world.
He seems to keep re-summarizing the thing. See where he says, the mind is only a means, the body is only a tool, and then you have the third dimension.
Okay, let's continue. Roberto?
Where exactly?
So,
396. 97.
Okay. Out of the mind she rose to escape its law, that it might sleep in some deep shadow of self, or fall silent in the silence of the unseen. High she attained, and stood from nature free, and saw creation's life from far above. Thence upon all she laid her sovereign will, to dedicate it to God's timeless calm. Then all grew tranquil in her being's space. Only sometimes small thoughts arose and fell, like quiet waves upon a silent sea, or ripples passing over a lonely pool, when a stray stone disturbs its dreaming rest. Yet the mind's factory had ceased to work. There was no sound of the dynamo's throb. There came no call from the still fields of life. Then even those stirrings rose in her no more. Her mind now seemed like a vast empty room, or like a peaceful landscape without sound. This men call quietude and prize as peace, but to her deeper side all yet was there, effervescing like a chaos under a lid. Feelings and thoughts cried out for word and act, but found no response in the silenced brain. All was suppressed, but nothing yet expunged. At every moment might explosion come. Then this too paused. The body seemed a stone. All now was a wide, mighty vacancy, but still excluded from eternity's hush. For still was far the repose of the Absolute, and the oceaned silence of infinity.
Thank you. Let's pause. Here, Sri Aurobindo seems to be describing this process of silencing the mind. Reminds us of his experience sitting with Lele for 3 days, in which he was silencing his mind. And he seems to go through some of the subtleties of that process here. First, kind of looking from above and seeing the movements of thought and life as if detached from them, maybe even far below, like quiet waves upon a silent sea, or ripples passing over a lonely pool when a stray stone disturbs its dreaming rest. And then even those stirrings rose in her no more. Her mind now seemed like a vast empty room, or like a peaceful landscape without sound. But then he says, but to her deeper sight all yet was there, effervescing like a chaos under a lid. Feelings and thoughts cried out for word and act, but found no response in the silenced brain. So even still, she's able to sense kind of these thoughts and feelings, but they can find no way to express themselves. And then he says, then this too paused. The body seemed a stone. All now was a wide, mighty vacancy. But then he says, even this was not the eternity's hush, or the ocean silence of infinity. So even this was not that ultimate silence of the divine. Even now, some thoughts could cross her solitude. So then, Savitri is experiencing some thoughts that seem to come from far above, no longer, manufacturers of the brain or of these lower levels of the brain, but something from high above, almost like divine thoughts. Children of cosmic nature from a far world. Ideas, shapes, in complete armor of words, posted like travelers in an alien space. Or maybe I've gone too far. Perhaps. Or, from overmind or from some high levels, divine levels of mind. You have to remember that even, supermind is not silent like that. It also there is this also divine expression in idea. So can we continue? I think I went a little too far. I think we're at the second line.
Yeah.
Second line from the top, is that it? No? Okay, 4, 3, 5.
4, 3, 5. Okay. Out of some far expanse they seemed to come, as if carried on vast wings like large white sails, and with easy access reached the inner ear, as though they used a natural privileged right to the high royal entries of the soul. As yet their path lay deep concealed in light. Then looking to now whence the intruders came, she saw a spiritual immensity pervading and encompassing the veiled space, as ether our transparent, tangible air, and through it sailing tranquilly a thought, as smoothly glides a ship nearing its port, ignorant of embargo and blockade, confident of entrance and the visa's seal. It came to the silent city of the brain, towards its accustomed and expectant quay, but met a bearing will, a blow of force, and sank, vanishing in the immensity. After a long vacant pause, another appeared, and others, one by one, suddenly emerged. Minds unexpected visitors from the unseen, like far-off sails upon a lonely sea. But soon that commerce failed, none reached mind's coast. Then all grew still, nothing moved anymore. Immobile, self-wrapped, timeless, solitary. A silent spirit pervaded silent space.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So this reminds me of that line, only our soul's acceptance is our own. So here also, he's not accepting these thoughts that are coming as if sails upon the sea coming from afar. So they are coming towards him, and as was their habit, they would find easy access into the harbor of his soul. They would be accepted by his soul. But now he's saying no, and he's stopping them. So that's something that we all can do with not only these thoughts coming from far, high above, like in Savitri's case, but whatever thoughts or feelings may be coming to us, we can also say no to them. Our soul's acceptance is the key. So normally we just allow nature to act in us as it will, but our soul can also refuse. And so in order to bring it into a complete silence, which is Savitri's aim here, to become nothing so that she may become all, she wants to bring it into a complete silence. Accept none of these things.
It seems that these thoughts are stopped before they even form. They're coming from such a distance that it's like a new thought, and then stop. Because previously in the other level, it was actually stopping thought. And here, this is going to the extreme, where they can't even get there.
Right. Yeah, he's able to stop them before they are arriving into his individual expression. Shall we do one more or we stop? Okay, Helmut?
In that absolute stillness, bare and formidable, there was glimpsed an all-negating void supreme that claimed its mystic nihil's sovereign right to cancel nature and deny the soul. Even the nude sense of self grew pale and thin, impersonal, signless, featureless, void of forms. A blank, pure consciousness had replaced the mind. Her spirit seemed the substance of a name. The world, a pictured symbol drawn on self, a dream of images, a dream of souls, built up the semblance of a universe, or lent a spirit the appearance of a world. This was self-seeing. In that intolerant hush, no notion and no concept could take shape. There was no sense to frame the figure of things. A sheer self-sight was there. No thought arose. Emotion slept deep down in the still heart, or lay buried in a cemetery of peace. All feelings seemed quiescent, calm or dead, as if the heartstrings rent could work no more, and joy and grief could never rise again. The heartbeat on with an unconscious rhythm, but no response came from it and no cry. Vain was the provocation of events. Nothing within answered an outside touch. No nerve was stirred, and no reaction rose.
Thank you. Let's pause. So here we have the beginnings of the state of nirvana that Savitri is experiencing. There was glimpsed an all-negating void supreme that claimed its mystic nihil sovereign right to cancel nature and deny the soul. So she's entering into this emptiness, impersonal, signless, featureless, void of forms, a blank, pure consciousness had replaced the mind. All the thoughts and feelings had subsided. There was just this silence. No notion and no concept could take shape. There was no sense to frame the figure of things. A sheer self-sight was there. No thought arose. Absolute silence, quietude, emptiness. absolute peace. Vain was the provocation of events. Nothing within answered an outside touch. No nerve was stirred and no reaction rose. So it's quite unique that we get such a kind of vivid description of this state of Nirvana. And yet, Sri Aurobindo's description of this is going to continue. And the experience also can develop and deepen into different aspects, as we'll see next time. So we'll stop there for today.
Then all grew still, nothing moved anymore. Immobile, self-wrapped, timeless, solitary, a silent spirit pervaded silent space.
Thanks to Sri Aurobindo.